thanks for joining us here today. I'm very excited to speak with all of you about youth leadership in Africa and the opportunities and challenges that we face as a global community, but also as educators, as scientists, as entrepreneurs, and to find a way forward that's both inspiring and significant to the many people who we work with and partner with. I would ask you first for a quick round of introductions, and then we'll get underway.
So thank you so much, team, for meeting you. My name is Peter Okoth Aluoch. I'm a Kenyan citizen, so traveled just yesterday into New York. And in Kenya, I am the country director for Self-Help Africa. And Self-Help Africa has worked in Kenya for over a decade, since 2008, mainly leading agricultural development programs, working with smallholder enterprises and also business communities and quite a number of other research institutions. Kenya has around 47 counties, smaller counties, and Self-Help Africa is in 43 of those counties, which means we are in almost over 3/4 of the country. So implementing agricultural programs, working mainly with smallholder farmers and private companies for both local markets and cross-border and export markets. So thank you. It's good to meet you here.
Thanks for being here.
Great to meet you. I'm also Peter. I'm Peter Hirst. I've been working in an advisory capacity with Self-Help Africa for, I think, over a decade now, helping in a variety of ways on the Boston Advisory Board. I also, in my day job, work in the executive education field. And so one of the ways that I've been really privileged to help this organization is by making some of our courses at MIT Sloan executive education available to staff and other people that Self-Help Africa works with that wouldn't otherwise have access to this kind of leadership training and education. And
That's
Peter,
MIT Sloan School of Business.
That's the MIT Sloan School of Management.
Management,
Yes.
Got you. Okay, good.
It's a subtle distinction.
All right.
Sometimes.
Thank you.
But Peter was, I'm happy to say, one of the people that was able to take one of our courses, and I think we're going to talk in a little bit about what impact that had for you.
Yeah, it was quite an interesting platform.
I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm Neil deGrasse Tyson. I play an astrophysicist on TV. No, I'm a lifelong scientist. I think about the world scientifically. I've written extensively on what role science has, should, and would continue to play in advancing civilization, our health, our wealth, and our security anywhere in the world. And the history has shown that without some kind of investment in science or to embrace the fruits of science, economies don't grow, health stagnates, and so to whatever extent we can make sure that science rises in tandem with any of the brilliant management skills or tactics and tools that are necessary to grow an economy, that there's a scientific track right alongside it. Otherwise, it's happening in a vacuum, and especially in modern times where there is no future of civilization without some kind of development and harnessing of the methods and tools and discoveries of science.
Yeah. Thanks, Neil. My name is Connor Steelhouse. I'm an advisor with Self-Help Africa for community-led programming. And I'm really glad to be here with you guys today because I think, as you just sort of identified, this is a very sort of pivotal moment for us as a species, as a planet, as a global community, where we face enormous challenges in the face of the climate crisis, instability, rising social inequality, and at the same time, there's incredible potential, there's incredible opportunity, and there's an acceleration of learning and innovation as people globally are becoming better connected and able to exchange more on these things. And so excited for this conversation today and to learn more about the experiences that each of you have had engaging with this next generation that's really rising right now, that's trying to address these issues, and to learn more about your optimism, your concerns and to sort of see where that takes us. But I'd like to start by asking you, Peter Hirst, to speak a little bit about what youth leadership means in the context of these crises to you, and what you have seen as an educator in terms of what this next generation's leadership looks like.
Sure. I'd also like to start by echoing what Neil just said, like the important juxtaposition of science and technology, in our case engineering, perhaps at MIT, with the fact that it's organizations which are made of people that actually put these things into practice in the world. And so one of the things that was really appealing to me when I first learned about Self-Help Africa is that this is not just a model of giving some people some money and or giving them some charity, as it were, but it's really a model of using learning and innovation and the role that technology and so forth can play in that to actually sustainably help make that impact for people in parts of the world that historically have not had access to the resources or the learning or the science and the engineering and the technology and so forth. And so the fact that this organization is bringing that kind of not just resource, but also energy and I think inspiration into the countries that Self-Help Africa works in Africa is tremendously important. I think what's also clearly the case everywhere in the world, but especially in the countries that Self-Help Africa works in, is that it's the future generation of leaders and managers and entrepreneurs and business people and farmers and people in the food supply system that are really going to make that sustainable impact. So whatever it is that we can do to really not only support but inspire those future generations is really critical. And it's so fantastic that this organization focuses so much of its energy and its effort on exactly that mission.
I want to clarify, because using the word sustainable different from how it's typically used today. People say, is it a sustainable crop, or is it what you mean was very important use of the word sustainable, that as you began, it's not just a handout, it's not just a gift, it is having people learn enough to take ownership of their own decisions as they go forward. And the sustainability is that doesn't require a continuous infusion of capital or of advice, because it becomes self-driven.
Right.
And it's the whole mission statement, right. I guess. Yeah.
It becomes what we would call a reinforcing system.
Yes. Yeah.
When we were sort of before we started talking here, you were sharing a great story about some of the kids who've reached out to you about Pluto, and
get over it.
Yeah. But one of the things that stood out to me as I was sort of ruminating on this question is that those are kids who are now engaged with the conversation of astronomy, who have an opinion, who have been inspired to contest your position on this. And I wonder about how you inspire leadership and that type of vision in this next generation.
Yeah, that's a very important question. And I wasn't doing it with any master plan in mind, but there are ways to present the moving frontier of science where people are enchanted by it, or they want a front row seat on what's happening. And when that happens with an earlier generation, with the youth, even very early, because my field is quite accessible to very young children. You know, we all look up at night, you know, especially in Africa. You have clear skies in Africa, not light polluted skies. And you say, what is that? It's the moon, or it's a star, or there's a planet, there's an eclipse, there's a conjunction of a crescent moon, and there are things that happen that can stimulate your curiosity without having to open a textbook. And it's these taproots of curiosity, which children already have, because children are born curious. But if you align that curiosity to we think of the universe and astrophysics as a gateway science, because in the universe, to know what stars and gas clouds and planets, you have to know math, you have to know chemistry, and in the search for life in the universe, you have to know some biology. So by coming in and wondering about our place in the universe, that opens up so many branches of science and technology, because we don't know anything about the universe without an engineer building it. Okay? You know, we get all the media attention when we make a discovery with an orbiting telescope or or a space probe. Somebody had to build that. That's the engineer, the unsung engineer who's behind the curtain making it. And so the engineering dimension of this is also a path you can take once your curiosity has been directed and suitably stimulated. So that's an important. So it's not just let's train a next generation of management. It's let's put things in place that can ensure that the curiosity in childhood of wonder and discovery continues up through the system so that they don't lose it in middle school or in adulthood. And what is a curious child who retains their curiosity into adulthood? We call them scientists.
I think that's excellent. Peter, so I'm just thinking about this in the context.
But which Peter are you talking about?
Yes, this is going to be.
Okay.
In the context of Kenya, which has rapidly become one of the most digitally connected countries, not only in Africa but globally. What does that curiosity? What does sparking that curiosity look like? And where have you seen it lead in your work with?
Yeah, so when Neil was talking, and I just remembered when we were still young, as youth coming up, and every night we used to get out of the house and see the stars and the moon, because he said that in Africa the sky is quite clear, and for sure it is quite clear. You'll see the moon from the beginning until it goes down. You will remember recently in Kenya we had the Gen Z demonstrations on the streets demanding accountability from the government. So when we talk about the next generation of leaders and also the curiosity that is with the young people, I think that presents very clear path on how the future probably will look like, because the youth are becoming more aware of what leadership is, what accountability is, what growth is and development. So even in terms of holding the government accountable on what they need to deliver, that will champion youth getting into the next level. That is so clear as presented from the example of Kenyan demonstrations or in the streets. But I'd like to mention that as we think about that curiosity, it is important to look at what parameters, what are the drivers, what will make youth get to the next level. And what will make them get to the next level keenly will depend on how much resources we are putting in place to support youth development, how much in terms of policy we are putting in place, and especially where we get youth involved in terms of policy design that will champion that. I like one example that I will share probably in Kenya in terms of innovation. So Kenya is fast growing in terms of technology. When you look at the M-Pesa, for example, when you look at the science on artificial intelligence, a lot of innovations are coming in. So this means that if we really want the next generation of leaders to come from the youth, then we must get them involved into the creation of different innovations and technologies that will be attractive. For a long time, agriculture in Africa has been looked at the poorest sector. So people who do farming, people who are considered to be poor, and so a lot of youth shy away from there. But I will give you an example of a few things Self-Help Africa is doing to ensure that we get youth involved and they can take leadership of the next level of development that we see. For example, we have a crop in Kenya called cassava. Cassava is considered a traditional crop done by poor people. So if you want people to participate in cassava, you make it more attractive. So what do we do? What did we do as an organization? We brought in new technology that would ensure that we have rapid multiplication of the planting materials from tissue culture, and then you bring them to, you introduce tracking systems on the different varieties on the nodes. And this technology ensures that within a period of 1 month, between 2 weeks to 4 weeks, you can produce thousands of planting materials, as opposed to previously you take over 10 months to just get like 10 planting materials to the farmers. And this is one thing that has enabled a lot of youth engagement, because they like to see how fast that technology is making cassava grow. So a lot of youth are picking it up to ensure that they can rapidly multiply, and they see the business, the commercial sense, because they want quick money. So if you can give them a technology that enables them to multiply 20,000 planting materials and sell them in the next 2 months, then that is what exactly they want. So we've seen youth leadership coming as a result of that technology, so they can feel like we are leading the process, we are developing, and we are serving the community. And that is something that we like to continue promoting. We have also in one of our programs in NASA locations, the areas of Baringo, which are quite dry, and we have had a lot of this invasive species of plant. We call it the Prosopis juliflora. It was brought into Baringo to support grow faster and cover the soil and prevent erosion, and it was really useful. The intentions were good. Unfortunately, it became an invasive species in the area, and it ended up killing a lot of livestock. So when animals eat it, then their tooth decays, and then finally they cannot eat anything. They start getting emaciated and the animals die.
Because it's extremely high in sugar.
Yeah,
Right?
it is. Its temperature is about 40 degrees. And they can go several seasons without rainfall, and that continues to threaten the community. The youth in those locations tend to shy away, move into cities to look for jobs. And Self-Help Africa, having looked at those challenges, looked like, how do we engage the youth into making productive use of Prosopis? So we conducted some researches on the pods, because when you pick up the pod and you mill the pod, then you destroy the ability to germinate. Because when they're eaten by animals, then they keep dropping them everywhere. They get an opportunity to germinate and they continue spreading. So when we did a starch analysis of those pods and realized they have high protein content, like above 16%, which can easily be integrated into local production of animal feeds, and the youth got trained, and women who can now pick up the pods, and actually now it became a business. People pick up the pods and they come and drop them at the center of processing. And you find youth leading the processing and mixing, and out of it, people get the animal feed, which now they can store and feed their animals during dry season. So we also see this is beginning to drive a lot of transformation and change of mindset among young people coming from Baringo, because they feel like, oh, we can do it. And, they see the struggles people have had with the use of Prosopis. So an alternative use to mail those pods and get those pods as animal feed, and now that reduces the level in which Prosopis is spreading in the area. So I think that we just need to look at what are the best options available for the youth as we think about them leading into the future.
You said so many interesting things there. One of them that I was very, very struck by was the way you described that you're really going through the process of doing a kind of a business analysis to sort of look at what the needs and the opportunities are there. And then the second thing was, it's not a case that this organization is giving jobs to people, that you're really creating the system and the circumstances in which people's own entrepreneurial spirit can flourish, and they're creating their own future in that way, which is fantastic.
Yeah, there's quite interesting things with the current young youth. They want evidence, because that evidence informs them on what the gains are there.
Evidence is always good.
Yeah, it is.
We love data.
Yes.
Evidence. Yeah. No, I'm reminded. I mean, there's a backstory here where Thomas Malthus, a few centuries ago, he saw farmers and he saw the population growth, and he made the dire prediction that the rate at which we're producing food will get outstripped by the rate at which we are growing the population, and one day there'd be mass starvation for that reason. And what he had not considered is the application of science and technology to food, to the production, the distribution, the storage of food. And so we have more food produced on less land by fewer people than ever before. And so he had no foresight to that. And so what you're describing here is the innovations brought to the production of food, which can increase profits at production, and it's an exciting, right. So no longer is the farmer the poor farmer who's just, picking crops by hand. It's an entire business model that who wouldn't want to be a part of that if it's growing and it's got cool solutions to it, and your own innovations, if you're thinking about it from the beginning, could continue to help that, right? You would surely teach that in any management school, who task people with whatever is your operation. Can you make it more efficient?
Yep.
Can you produce more? Can you grow the demand for it?
Yep.
That's all together. But you need that science and technology. I don't mean to beat a dead horse there.
Yep.
No,
Yes. Actually, I have an example of one young guy who also participated in the MIT Sloan courses, and for her she did supply chain management. So her story is that she suffered on managing a supply chain when she was starting, and the produce from the farmers and then how she gets down to the market was a huge trouble. So after she went through the MIT courses, which was sponsored in partnership with Self-Help Africa, before I traveled here, I decided to reach out to her and say, how are you doing with the course? Did you implement the learnings? So she told me, Peter, you need to come and see what I'm doing. And you need to come and see the systems which I've put in place. And currently, I think my income has grown triple from what I used to get, simply because I improved on my supply system. And I was like, now, you're saying your systems has improved, and now you covered your losses and no longer there, you're moving towards high profitability. And then she said, yes. And then I was like, do you know other people who did not participate in that course and what kind of challenges they're still having? And then she said, there's a number of other people who are not involved in learning, and now they are struggling and I have to find ways of supporting them. So what I want to bring in here is the power of putting knowledge in the hearts of the youth. When you put knowledge in the businesses, I mean practical knowledge that they can daily utilize, then I think we end up positioning them in a manner that they can compete with any other person in the areas.
I agree.
And could you remind me just a quick, this kind of off topic, but cassava, isn't that one of those fruits that you have to prepare it in a special way, otherwise it will kill you?
Yeah.
Am I misremembering that? Please clarify
yes.
that.
There's this notion that cassava, perception, I think it is just perception. People think cassava kills. And for sure it kills, because if you take the old varieties which have got high cyanide levels.
Oh, it's a cyanide in it.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's a cyanide.
Okay, so I didn't just dream that. It's really true. Okay.
It's a tuber crop. So what we've done is to also to deal with that notion, what we've done is to introduce new varieties which are fast maturing and also have low levels of cyanide.
Okay.
Minimum acceptable level, which is quite good. So those ones are the ones.
Acceptable levels of cyanide.
Acceptable level. Yeah, sure.
Then of course there's a washing process.
Yeah.
So I'm struck, by this story, and it ties back to some of the things that I've seen you say previously. And as background, 70% of the folks living in sub-Saharan Africa are 30 or under. It's an extremely young population, and that it's an increasingly connected population. And so this exchange of information that you're talking about, this woman who's improved her supply chain and is beginning to connect, hopefully, with her community to share some of these insights. What have you seen in terms of this global connectivity, in terms of fostering that curiosity, but also specifically around STEM, around some of these innovative practices that are going to take things like the cassava cyanide issue and say, what if we select for cassava that is lower in cyanide than other varieties, and test for that and so forth. But I'm just curious, when you've spoken
I have
about that.
sort of a more obtuse way to think about this. Is that okay? Can I be obtuse?
Yes, please be obtuse. Yeah.
There are people who want to live forever. Okay, and we are living longer. And let's divide the world up into 20-year increments. So 0 to 20, 20, 40, 40, 60, 60, 80, 80 to 100. All right, that's basically the whole world. If you're lucky enough to go over 100, you're statistically insignificant in this number. All right, the people. If you look at that population and you ask, what age demographic is all the innovation coming from? It's not 40 to 60, 60 to 80, 80 to 100. It's 0 to 20, 20 to 40. And so the people who want to just live forever, if that actually happened, then the older folks will begin to significantly outnumber the younger folks, and society will be laden with completely unproductive people. I mean, you could be, riding high off the money you've earned your whole life, but you're not discovering anything. You're not innovating. You're not transforming industries. You're not inventing new industries. How old was Steve Jobs in his garage, and Bill Gates, all of them, and so that age. This demographic, 70% is 30 and younger. That's the time to stimulate the curiosity, because it's not happening when they're older.
Yeah.
They're just sitting back if they're rich enough, on their yacht, milking the world for what the innovations of others have delivered. So that's a kind of obscure response to your question.
Yeah.
But I just want to make that clear, that between birth and 30, that's where the action is.
In terms of the students that you have who come through your program, how would you sort of characterize that youthful curiosity, if you will, and
exuberance?
Yeah.
Well, first of all, it's fair to say that there are very few, if any, people who come through something called an executive education program that are in that 0 to 30 bracket. Sometimes we see them, but they're more likely to be people like Peter, who have an enormous opportunity to inspire and support that upcoming generation, and that I think we see that as really fundamentally important. I mean, just to repeat a word that I said earlier, I think this entrepreneurial spirit, the spirit of entrepreneurship, driven by the curiosity that Neil is talking about, and the belief that you can actually do something that makes a difference in the world. That's something that we do, I think, see much more. If I think about MIT students, every undergraduate student, every graduate student that are in degree programs at MIT, they're really enthusiastic about what they're going to go and do to set up a company, go work in a large company, go and work with a nonprofit and do something that makes a difference. The more senior people that we see coming through these so-called executive programs, they've already done a lot of that. But what they have, to the point that Neil was making earlier, is they have access to resources. They have the ability to create the systems that enable this flourishing. Hopefully we help them really realize that they also have a role as a leader. That part of all of our responsibilities. Leader doesn't mean that I've got a fancy title at the top of an organization. We see leadership as something which every human being possesses, but there's something that some of us, because of some combination of good fortune and perhaps some hard work and other things that we've brought to the table, have this position, and position does sometimes matter, and resources that actually enable us to help really steer that direction and make that difference. But the reality is, the future does belong to these generations, and many of the systems that have made us successful are frankly already massively being disrupted by what these coming generations are doing. And if we recognize that, we can embrace it and support it, or we could put up the shutters and try to go to our island and do nothing.
Right. And I want to add, I think you began this conversation commenting on the pace of change that we face. And I just want to highlight, because I do a fair amount of review of how people think about the times in which they lived. And in the era of the Industrial Revolution, there is no time when people said, oh, there hasn't been much change lately. No, we've been slow. No one has ever said that at any time. Okay? I mean, consider that you go from like steamships in the late 1800s to airplanes, but we still have horses. We had airplanes before we had cars, before cars were mass produced, right? And so around at the same time, actually. And so then we have cars. And these are changes that are happening. Then we have jet travel, and then we have computers, and then all of this. So if we speak of today as it's changing faster than ever before, that's true, but no one has ever felt differently about the time in which they lived. So the fact that it's changing rapidly is what's constant, if I may say it in that way. And so, and the next generation, they're born into this change. That's the way things normally happen. It's the old folks who say, boy, this is happening fast. I don't know what I'm going to do. If you had a kid, a daughter who said, when I grow up, I want to be a YouTube influencer, you would say, what? Go back to school. And she becomes a YouTube influencer making more money than you. All right. Yeah. So this change in what people value, what is the economic sources of the economic fruits of tomorrow, they're different from today. And that next generation, they're going to see that first.
I think also this goes to the next sort of line here around resourcing this perspective in entrepreneurship and innovation and so forth. But that kind of goes back to this question of what is the resource that is both required and what's generated. And I often, money, yeah, we're talking capital.
Resource is like euphemism, money.
Yeah. But I don't want to undervalue the resource of being able, and this goes back to tying into being able to look up at the night sky and have those questions. And not everyone has that opportunity.
Forces of inspiration.
Forces of inspiration.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think that is, when we talk about investment in the next generation of leaders, I don't want to get lost in the conversation that capital is the only resource that's required. It is up there in terms of importance, but it's a really important angle. And I wonder, Peter, if there's any sort of examples of, certainly I've seen it in my time in Kenya working with you there. But to your mind, that ideation as a resource that you've seen really stand
are there museums? What role do museums play? Because that's when my first night sky was the Hayden Planetarium in New York City. Because New Yorkers, we don't have a relationship with the night sky. You look up, there's a building, there's light pollution, and so for me, and I think regionally, access to these places where knowledge and wisdom and access to the world, the art world as well, but of course the science world, that's where it not only germinates, but it gets fed.
Yep. Well, I don't want to let the elders off the hook, but I do think that is one of those things, right?
So thank you. Like when you let me give you some practical experiences. I think I've been working with youth for the last 10 years in our programming. And one of the things we have realized is that money is not a problem for the youths. In Kenya, currently the government has expanded access to finance for the youth in several ways. So you have youth enterprise funds, you have got mobile money. So even if you just save like 1 shilling, 10 shillings, you build up your savings culture, you're able to get funding to start something. You go to community-based village savings associations and you find money there. Like they are quick money. We have a lot of online platforms that give money to young people to be able to start businesses. But there's still something that is lacking. I think sometimes we think it's access to information. Neil was talking about museums, and for sure there are museums in Kenya, and you go there, you can get information. But the question is, how many people access those museum services? Do they even know such information is there? So that's sometimes becoming a big barrier. The resources are there, but now access is what is really lacking. I feel that we first need to think of how do we get youth aware of their environment, not really before their environment, aware of themselves. Like if you're aware of yourself, your capacities, your limitations, what you can do better, then you can start working on what you're strong at to build it up, to be able to get there. And then you start looking for resources. What we've done is to support youth, understand who they are and what they are good at. For the last 2 years, Self-Help Africa has conducted training for youth on artisanal programs, because you find youth in different villages. Some other of them are in slums. And when they fail to get to the secondary level, they feel like now there is no future for them. And they are lying outside there. If they are ladies, they will get pregnant and then continue to stay as married wives, housewives, probably doing nothing. So what we did was to start by helping these young people understand what they are and what they are good at. And then from there, you start to understand, like, how do you want to develop that which you're good in? So some of them will tell you, I'm a good cook. Some of them will tell you, oh, I know how to do clothing. I can mend, I can design. I know how to prepare ugali. So if you know how to prepare ugali bread, then you can do cake. And that was the conversation. Very informal, just sitting down with people in groups, people who consider themselves to have failed from school. And then now from there, you understand how to align them to their interests. So you get some colleges. Now, we got some colleges now, and then we registered a few of them with National Industrial Training Institute, which is really the basic. So they can start now to develop their ideas from there. Then now from National Industrial Training Institute, they get a lot of support. Right now, we have a pool of over 20 young entrepreneurs who had lost hope, never considered to be like they could make life meaningful. So I think, and at that point, we never spoke about money. We were just speaking about build your skill, develop it, think about how you want to grow it in the next 5 years and 10 years' time. And then now when they are done, finally, then now money become meaningful. Access to money, like you tell them, do you have a WhatsApp, an M-Pesa account? And do you have a bank account? Some of them get to the age of 25, they still don't have any bank account. So you want to get to the banks to look at the history of savings, and you want to give them credit based on the history of savings. They have zero. So I think closely talking to these people, understanding who they are, their interest, and aligning that interest to opportunities available in the market is what we need to think through. And that is how we have grown up young people into business and enterprise to become leaders.
I think one of the things that you said there that really stands out is that it's also not about coming in and teaching, but it's about finding the knowledge and expertise that's there and building it up. And I'm not going to attribute this quote, but it's this idea that there's museums everywhere for those with eyes to see, right? And I think that's it speaks to this experience that I had in Kenya a number of years ago, sitting in Nakuru County. And there's this church elder who stood up when we were discussing the concept of enterprise. And to him, the definition of enterprise was someone who looks at a challenge and sees the opportunity on the backside. And he did this with his hand. And that stuck with me because that is the expertise that those young entrepreneurs need to gather, and it's right there with them. And I think this is, what I was joking, we don't want to let the elders off the hook for, just, moving gracefully into age, but there is an enormous amount of knowledge and expertise there. And I think that can't be lost when we're talking about youth entrepreneurship and youth leadership, is the importance of local elders, community elders, to connect and inform and guide that process, because that's where that much of that cultural and historical knowledge sits.
I think he's talking about us, Neil.
Should I reply to that? Or should I? I'm just saying there's some advice from the elders that has been rendered irrelevant or even dangerous going forward, given advances in technology and opportunity. One has to, I guess, cherry pick what that advice might be. There was an old saying, I haven't heard it lately, but it's certainly still true. Never take car buying advice from your father. Because the cars have changed and they have no idea. They're clueless. So I thought that was very deep, because it applies not just to cars, but to so yes, there's certain wisdom. I think is perhaps it's the wisdom that has value more than the knowledge. The knowledge will change, but wisdom is the distilled essence of your life experience, and usually that comes back out in simple sentences. I see the challenge; it's an opportunity. That's wisdom. Yeah. But if you say, these newfangled computers, they'll never amount to anything, that's just stupidity. That may have meant something in the day when, because I'm old enough to remember, there was a day when this saying existed: to err is human. To really foul things up requires a computer, okay? Because at the time, code still was buggy, storage devices were, so you could say that, and it kind of meant something at the time, but not anymore. Yeah. So you'd have to cherry pick, and you don't always know what to cherry pick to bring forward.
Which is where what you were describing really struck me. I don't know if you think about it this way, but you're really kind of using the scientific method in the approach that you're taking. Because you are developing hypotheses about what might work. You're actually going out and trying those experiments. You're seeing what actually happened, and you're adjusting and selecting for the things that are effective and continuously improving in that way. And I don't know whether you conceptualize what you're doing, but I think that's a really important approach. It's not just somebody comes in with a master plan for how this is going to work and we implement it, but you're really experimenting your way to discovering the future, which is just fantastic.
Yep. I think this is, currently we're really working with human-centered approaches. If you go to Baringo County, for example, where we work, a lot of youth were not into pasture development until when we started the livestock upgrading scheme. So when they were still keeping the same livestock, one pastoral household will keep like 1,000 cattle, or 2,000 or 3,000. When drought comes, all these will die, and then they get back to zero. So when we saw that and engaged the community, then started the livestock upgrading schemes, now introducing Saiwal to be able to upgrade.
And Saiwal is?
Yes. Saiwal is a new breed that is from
Pakistan.
Pakistan.
Desert resistant.
Yes, it is drought resistant, and it is also resistant to most of the diseases. And they can live on little pasture. So when that was brought into the community, and now they begin to see the animals building weight as opposed to the traditional varieties that we used to have, then they also see now the value, because if your animal, the indigenous breeds will weigh like 50 kgs, but these ones will come with 100 kgs and double. So they don't see the value of keeping a lot of animals, so they will just keep a little. Then what happened? The youth started making pasture and selling pasture seed. So now you see a lot of women and youth, especially youth, are the ones growing pasture, and they're selling pasture seed to the community to be able to feed their livestock. So when drought comes, you have a community that is now more resilient, because they cut the pasture and they store hay. They can now give back to the seed, sell back the seeds to the community. And through that, we see a lot of engagement. And if you go to Baringo County, they feel like youth are the ones leading on pasture seed, so you don't ask it from the other community. So I think it is more of like community-centered approaches, understanding their visions and what they want to do, how they see the community in the next 5 years or 10 years time, and what is the role of each and every person, the role of women, the role of youth into this whole process, and aligning our development plan according to that.
You're describing something there which strikes me as well. I mean, it's very important to the work that you're doing, but you talked about how those people, when they're successful, they also see their role as reinvesting in their community and building up that community and that ecosystem. And learning goes in two directions. There's a lot for us to learn.
Yeah, sure.
One of the parts of that story that you left out that I find particularly interesting, and this goes to the sort of scientific method approach to it. So one of the big challenges that the Kenyan cattle industry and dairy industry has faced for decades is that American dairy came in a number of years ago and brought in Holstein cows because they were the highest milk producing cows. And so if you want to produce an enormous amount of milk, which is Kenya consumes an enormous, a shockingly enormous amount of milk on a daily basis.
A lot, yes.
Yeah, well, maybe we'll ask you how many liters a day it is later, but it's a lot. But these cows, when they are malnourished, their birth canal is not large enough to deliver the calves that come out of a Holstein, and so they would die during childbirth or calf birth. Don't quote me on that. But this was an enormous problem, and the solution was to keep importing more Holsteins. Yeah. And for decades, this completely undermined the independence and autonomy of the Kenyan dairy industry until this research, which has been done in partnership with the Kenyan government, has begun to bring in drought-resistant, desert-tolerant varieties, crossbreed them for the Kenyan context with Kenyan cattle.
Yeah. So those aren't just camels? They're not just, okay. Try to picture this new subspecies of
beautiful,
cattle.
It's sort of like a mix between
Isn't that a camel? I think that's a camel.
Yeah. Actually, Kenya is a heavy consumer of milk. Like a household will be taking 5 liters per day of milk.
It's an incredible amount of milk.
You drink it?
Yes, we drink a lot of milk. Every household, every morning and evening. So what the government did, we kept on struggling with, like Connor was saying, the breeds from the US. And then, they are heavy consumers of concentrates. So when you put them onto the other fodder crops, they don't survive so well. And the challenge with that is that small and poor communities or households will not afford the cost of the concentrates because you have to keep on buying and buying to feed them. So what we did after understanding that challenge is to try to introduce a new feeding regime using the fodder crops now. So we introduce, through research, an economic breeding index that now moves from the research now to the community level, so that people can grow fodder and learn how to mix different fodders to get high yield of milk. And do you know what? This whole technology is led by young people and women. And then women will take up milk and start value addition at the community level to be able to feed. Like in Nakuru, for example, the malnutrition rate among small babies below the age of 5 and breastfeeding mothers is so high. So what they did under the Women Entrepreneurs, Rural Women Entrepreneurs Program is to train them to start value addition at the community level to address the local malnutrition challenges so that you don't have to go to a pharmacy or chemist to buy tablets to get appetite, to just eat specific foods that will be aligned to your appetite, and then you get the nutrients available. And all this is happening at the community level. So we have just noticed, if you understand the community or interests and the role of each stakeholder in those communities, youth will find their place, women will find their place. And this is why it is important at project inception to use community-centered approach, human-centered approaches, because that will enable you to understand all the interest of everybody. So before you even start the program, youth already know what they are going to do there. Women already understand what their role is, and the government understand their role. Right now, we are handing over one of the programs in Baringo to the county government, And I can tell you the government is not using another structure except the structure that was already established by Self-Help Africa, because that is a working model. The youth are aligned, women are aligned, and elderly people are aligned, and everybody knows their role in the all economic growth of that community. And this is what we love.
That's another really great example, I think, of what this organization does so well and is so important, is that you're understanding the system, and systems sometimes are quite complex.
Yeah.
And we human beings, our brains have not evolved very well to be able to understand these complex systems and what ultimately determines the behaviors of people in those systems. But you do have to understand them and how they're interconnected. And doing that hard work that you do is what is enabling you to have that impact, because cause and effect aren't always right next to each other.
Yeah, sure.
The things you're describing is you have to really understand what's the root cause of something, and then you can solve that problem and have the kind of impact that you're looking for. And that's a very powerful way of working, which unfortunately is not that common. So again, congratulations to you on that.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
So one of the things I want to ask about is one of the challenges that many of these youth innovators in Kenya face, and I would say young scientists in general, is breaking into narrative norms about this is what innovation is. Actually, you're not doing that. How can you be a scientist in rural Kenya if you're not in Nairobi in front of a computer doing all these things? And I wanted to ask you, Neil, as a science communicator, what wisdom do you have for youth to break into these dominant frameworks and to shift and to create ripples that can last?
Yeah, I don't have a silver bullet there.
Sure.
But I do know that the more ambitious someone is, the more resolve they carry with them in their lives to navigate obstacles. Either climb over them, go around them, dig under them, dissolve them. And I can just give from my own life, my interest in the universe began at age 9 at a first visit to the Hayden Planetarium. And every time I looked up at night or looked through a telescope or through binoculars, I had like a fuel tank, an ambition fuel tank, that every time I did that, it added a little bit of fuel. And then if anything happened where, I grew up at a time where people of my skin color were not identified as anything other than athletes or entertainers. So for me to have ambitions outside of the expectations of society, to survive that required spending some of that fuel. And they say, oh, no, I said, I want to be in the physics club. Oh, why don't you join the basketball team? We can be. I need some fuel there just to get through these forces that are operating on me. And then it's time to go to college. And, any force operating against me, this became a counterforce to overcome. And so I ask myself, having been through this, how many people who were ambitious ran out of fuel and they just did something else? So my goal, it's a implicit goal that I have when I'm educating people of any age, but especially if they're younger, I want to instill within them such a hunger for learning more and such an enthusiasm that if it clicks, nothing's going to stop them. And so then, so it's not creating a path for them, because I don't know what path I don't know what path might be necessary for one person versus another. Different people have their own challenges. It could be familial, it could be, whatever. Cultural, could be religious, it could be institutional, who knows? But once they're driven, they'll have the energy to navigate that. And so I've had kids come up to me and says, I saw this post you did on YouTube or whatever, and I'm reading all the books I can, and I'm seeing all the videos, and now I'm majoring in school, and there you go. That's the train in motion, okay, with momentum. And then it helped. Yes, we presume some advice from elders who will say, if you go that way, it might be less successful than if you try this way. They'll need some of that. Yeah. But I've been asked, again, this is slightly off, but I've been asked in public settings, if there's any advice you would give to your younger self, what would it be? And I've thought about that. And I said, it's no advice I would give my younger self. Because Decisions I made that didn't work out, that's life experience, okay? I mean, I have to say, wow, that didn't work out. Let me try a different way. And if you're going to go just based on advice so that you never go down alleys you go down blank alleys, you don't get the life experience of recovering from that, because you're going to need that later on. Any successful entrepreneur has had failures, 100% of them.
Yeah.
And so if all the advice is to prevent the failures, then I will be a weak person going forward without having had the life experience of recovering from it. So I told him, no, there's no advice I give my younger self. Now, you don't want to make the same mistake twice.
Yeah.
Then you're just stupid, okay? but you make a mistake once and then don't repeat that mistake. That's life experience. So it's the ambition that I think will get you through anything.
That reminds me of a story from my high school when we were in a chemistry lab and we were all complaining that the experiment wasn't working. And our very wise elder chemistry teacher said, no, chemistry experiments always work. You may not have been doing the experiment that you were supposed to be doing, or that you thought you were doing, but something happened and you learned something.
or something didn't happen, and there's a reason for that too. Right.
So this issue of failure is something I wanted to talk about a little bit, because I think for a lot of young folks that we talk to, sometimes that failure is out of their control. And I think it particularly in the context of the climate crisis, where back-to-back droughts followed by flooding, followed by invasive pests, can really undermine that fuel tank, can harm that fuel tank. But also there is opportunity there, and as we've already discussed. I wonder if there are any experiences that, from this more contemporary contextualization of the crisis that we face, if there are any examples from your teaching or your learning where you've seen people engage with that and come through with not necessarily a better perspective, but a one that will drive them forward.
It's possible to feel helpless in the face of forces, right, that are beyond your control, particularly in the farming world. I mean, not to sound bluntly ignorant of farming, I've never farmed before.
Yeah.
And I think I was 30 before I even met a farmer. Just to be clear, New York City is not a land of farmers.
But you already interacted with the food from the farm.
Food from the farm? No. The food just shows up. I'm not kidding here. You go to the store, that's where the food comes from. You're not thinking farmer or distribution channel. We're not thinking that. We just go to the store because that's where the food shows up, right? And so you want to live in a world where solutions are not closed off, either by some administrative forcing above you, governmental forcing. You want to be able to say, how can I mitigate any future drought? Is there a dam I can build that can irrigate? Are there wells I can dig? Is there an aquifer I can pull the water up? Use that? Is there a way that I'm not just a victim of the forces of nature? What is civilization if not overcoming what nature would have otherwise done to your circumstances? We build cities, we move rivers, we build flood walls. We do, yes, it has to happen once to know that you need it. But then, by the way, here in New York City, where we're recording this, Hurricane Sandy, Superstorm Sandy, when it hit New York, it was not hurricane level. It was already been reduced to tropical storm, but it hit New York during full moon, during high tide, with this huge water swell off the ocean, and it flooded the previous walls that had been where the power stations are, the previous walls that were set to cover, a once in 100-year flood. And so with climate change, of course, once in 100 years is now once in 10 years, right? It's a new normal. So every assault on you is an opportunity for innovation, so that does not happen again. And yeah, you suffer that one time, but you live another day to protect the next time that happens. You drive through Los Angeles, They have the L.A. River. Have you ever seen it? It's this cement basin that goes through the town. Movies are filmed on there. And there's a little trickle of water that got built to direct floodwaters based on a rare flooding situations that LA experiences. And so it's there. So now that whatever previously led to them building that has not repeated. Okay? They are not the victims of that flood because they innovated, they figured out how to redirect it. All I'm saying is we're not just, civilization has always been, how do we live in the face of forces of nature that would otherwise make our lives miserable? And including this pestilence. Is there some thing you can do to get rid of that insect or that what's this with I read recently about sickle cell and was it sickle cell? No, the dengue. What the mosquitoes transmit?
Mosquitoes. Yes.
Yeah, the mosquito.
Malaria.
Malaria.
Yeah.
Malaria. So they figured out a way to render. Was it the male mosquitoes? Impotent is not the right word. Infertile. So they go out and they'll still mate, but nothing happens. Right.
Yeah.
That's being clever.
Yeah.
Okay. That's all right. So as a scientist, every problem we face, like I said, is an opportunity to be innovative. Yeah. And let that be a call for a next generation. We have these problems. Who's with us to try to solve them, not how to run away from them.
Yeah. I like what Neil mentioned when he said that you look at one side, you see the challenge.
No, he said that, and then I echoed it.
Oh,
yes.
he said it.
Yeah.
I stole it as well. So.
Navigating complexities or challenges, crises can be difficult for young people. But I think with a proper basis, if they're set up well with the right idea, good passion, to desire to succeed, they can maneuver. I have an example of a lady who in 2022, we picked her enterprise as one of those businesses we were working with. It was still young, like an annual turnover below $50,000 US. So it was really still small business. And now then that was post-COVID. And she was like, my interest is to be able to sell to the US, to sell to Europe. I want to sell to China. And then we were like, oh, are you ready for that? Then you say, yes, I'm ready. But you understand there are complexities and a lot of challenges in the export market. How will you overcome that? And then he says, I will find my way once I get there. And then I was the program manager then. So I was asking her, so what do you want me to do for you? And I was talking like I'm the owner of all the things she wants. What do you want me to do for you? She said, if I can get Global Gap certification, then I will be so happy because I can sell to most of the markets. So we said, oh, so you just want Global Gap certification? And then she said, yes. Why? Because she had sent a consignment to Middle East, Dubai, and it was all thrown away because she did not have the standard. She could even ask those people to bring them back because it was going to be even costly. So the lady was onboarded into the program, and we said, we will get you a trainer to support you, build your capacity, set up systems in place to be able to get your Global Gap compliance and certification. And immediately she started the process, then we had a crash, the project that crashed. So we were not continuing. The trainer had not even got midway. And so she just saw all the hopes of getting the global certification dust, and she was coming back to the local market. But there's something I like about her resilience, like the ability is she's a young lady and the passion to keep on driving herself. She said when the project crashed early this year during the funding cuts, she just said, this is where we are. My business has to continue because I did not establish it on the foundation of all this support. All this support just came and found me moving forward. So despite the funding cuts, and now I'm not going to get the Global Gap, I still have to be in business. And do you know what she did? She invested more of her resources into the local markets and also expanded her business into the regional trade from Kenya to Uganda, then to Rwanda, sending heavy consignments on avocado, pineapple, mango, and all that.
So it was more incremental
Yeah.
as a path of growth.
Yeah,
Which is probably more sustainable.
Yeah,
Yes, yes, yes.
So she
Yeah.
just said, "I'm going to sell where the certification is not required." And so instead of struggling to sell into the other export markets where this certification is required, and now she cannot get that, she now picked up the alternative. And that is what is working. So the ability of young people to maneuver or be able to play around, have multiple routes, multiple options, rather than just focusing on this single one. So when it crashes, you fail completely, is one thing
Yes, the
that we need
resilience.
to build.
The
Yeah,
resilience is an important factor.
That is
Resilience
so
born
important.
from
Yeah.
challenge. So I want to, off of challenge, I want to ask a little bit about competition with you guys, because I think this is something that's very foundational to Self-Help Africa, that we are not providing aid, we are providing opportunity to build on what's already there. And I want to ask you about the role of competition in innovation or enterprise. Where have you seen that work? What are the considerations, to make sure that it's not that you're not that you're not centralizing power, but keeping it distributed amongst innovators and up and coming entrepreneurs. But what is that role in your mind?
I just want to give a lead-in comment, but I want to hear their reactions, especially to that question. For me, the word competition, there's an ugly side of that word, where I'm going to win at all expense and I'm going to suppress you.
Yeah.
All right. And we know people who think and feel that way. And, what is athletics if not there's a winner and a loser? Okay. I get that. But when I think of competition, I think of, is that what you're doing? I wonder if I can improve on that. And so, yeah, it means I might outsell you if I can improve. But my goal is to make something better, to make something more useful, more valuable. That's the goal. The goal is not to beat you, even if that's the consequence. The goal is to just improve things. And one of my joys, my sort of hidden joys, is anytime I stay with a brand, let's say, and they have a new version, new thing comes out, I like seeing what new innovations are in that versus the previous one. And then I look back 3 generations of that product before, and I say, wow, I can't believe I even tolerated that. Because incrementally there have been advances. And everybody benefits when that happens, especially the economy, and especially your bottom line. And so, yeah, competition should not be thought of as I'm getting ahead while you don't. Everybody benefits when everybody wants to improve what the process is.
Absolutely. I'd go even further than that and say without competition, innovation dies. Right? I mean, you might have the rare individual who just wants to keep improving something for the sake of improving it or for the intellectual curiosity, but in the real world,
they're greatly diminished in number.
The other thing is there's there are many different senses of the word competition. I just wanted to throw in there another one that I think what we've seen in terms of spurring innovation is that competitions that invite individuals and teams to thoughtfully try to address and challenge and innovate around particular kinds of problems that are out there in the world have tremendous outsized economic impact as well. We've got research that shows that if you have a competition for young people to try to address some particular, whether it's a technology challenge or a business challenge, you get something like 10x the effort out of those teams of people than you would have got if you'd just been paying people a salary for doing it. And so there's actually something that's really motivating to human beings, to us, about that sense of a competition. But what's also interesting about it is that they do it in teams. It's never an individual. It's always teams of people that are coming together, knowing that they can achieve more together than anyone could.
There's a literal economic model for that, which is the X Prize. And in the X Prize, I'll give just simple numbers so that you'll see how it works. Let's say, so the X Prize is you pick some impossible thing that maybe technology will get there, but we've all dreamt about it. And you say, that's the goal. Just set the goal, okay? And then it's $1 million prize, $1 million. And then 20 teams compete for those $1 million, but they're spending their own money to win the $1 million. 20 teams might each spend $100,000 to win $1 million. That meant $2 million was invested in the chance of getting the $1 million prize. So society benefits from that because people want the prestige. They want to get the million. You'll invest your 100,000 at that risk, and that's a force multiplier that has worked every single time.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it's more money that you would invest to get that to happen just if it was one team doing it.
Right. And I think part of the picture is, you put your finger on it, it's the inspiration that goes with it. And I think this brings us full circle to some of the questions that you were addressing earlier about what it takes to inspire people.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think...
And money is one of those things.
You return to that.
Let's be plain. Let's be blunt. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I think competition is, it's not... We can be in the same industry selling similar things, but the value proposition will be different. The products could be the same, but the value proposition for that product could be different. And this is what I tell enterprises every day, because we have all these companies in our programs, and a lot of them do similar things. So they feel like if you invite me for this training, I'm just going to meet my competitors, and probably we are learning the same thing. So when we get there, competition even become more stronger. And then we say, no, you have your own company, and the value proposition for this one is different from this one, even though you're in the same sector. And this is how we try to help them navigate through all of this process of competing. I always feel that a competition that is driven by the customer focus is healthy, because if the competition between you and I is driven by what the same customer we are targeting, that should be healthy, because you'll do more research to be able to win the market, and I will be doing more research, and basically we are doing different approaches in our research. So what we come out with totally are going to be different results. So at the end of the day, we are targeting the same customer, but with different value propositions, and that is positive competition. Yeah.
So one of the things that Self-Help Africa has moved into significantly in recent years is these challenge funds, where we hold competitions for seed funding and investment for private sector entities, and then provide, in addition to that funding, technical guidance, market linkage support, and so forth. And I was just wondering if we could draw out an example from the Agrify Agricultural Finance Challenge Fund project in Kenya that you ran, that really stood out to you for capturing that competition. But I think what you underscored, Peter, is that the competition which foments, which fosters collaboration, which is so key to its success.
Yeah. So we've been running a challenge fund in Kenya for private companies with annual turnover above $10,000. And when you send a call, you get all companies, both in the same department, same focus. If it is fresh fruits, if it is about processing manufacturers, you find all of them. But in terms of addressing the issues of competition, for Self-Help Africa, our approaches have been bespoke, targeted. So we know you're doing the same thing with the two companies are doing similar products, but then your problems or your challenges are different from the other one. So in our targeted approaches, we deal with you based on your own challenges without understanding how the other one even tries to solve them. But where we find that there's need for intercompany learning to be able to learn from what other people are doing, then we encourage intercompany learning. So we use two approaches. We do targeted interventions on similar companies, but they do different things. And then we use peer learnings to be able to also overcome these challenges. When people learn from one another and they are accepting to give information, then we feel that that is maturity in business. Of course, they have other private or secrets of their businesses that they would not like to share. But at peer-to-peer, they try to open up to be able to share challenges and how they are coming up with solutions. And we think that is always a good approach.
We see that playing out in our classrooms all the time in our executive education programs. You had that experience. Maybe you could share, because you said there were people from many companies in that class with you.
Yeah, sure. So, like what we've learned of late is classroom approaches are not the best, because you put all the 20 or 10 CEOs in a sitting and then you deliver the same thing, not understanding that they have different problems or different challenges. So we tend to shy away from the classroom approaches, and then we put them on one-to-one approach to be able to deliver that. When we were doing a program with MIT, one thing I loved with that program is the kind of the kind of approach that the learning was given. So you will go into different groups depending on which categories or sectors you're coming from, then discuss the challenges for that sector. Another team will be on group together depending on which sectors they're coming from, and then they learn from that sector. Then you will bring somebody who has been in the sector for a long time to see it and also share information, and they are learning their experiences. How did they overcome all these challenges to get to where they are? And now that part now is the most inspiring. And when it comes to inspiration, everybody will pick them differently. So even if we were competitors, we go back, the way I was inspired is not the same way you inspired. What I picked is not the same as what you picked. And now you get back on your business and start now to implement the learnings. So we also do differently in terms of implementing those learnings. So I think like the example of a company, the supply chain lady who did the supply chain, she attended the same learning with 2 other companies. But when you go back today into those companies, you find they have implemented different components of that learning, even though they were in the same class. Mm-hmm. So everybody picked what they thought was relevant for their companies. So, Connor, I think that is how our approaches both has worked for us in different programs in the Challenge Fund and also in the other interventions that we are doing as Self-Help Africa.
Mm. So we've had sort of glimmers come up throughout this conversation, but I want to sort of finish by asking each of you if there are innovators, youth leaders, entrepreneurs, dreamers, scientists, whomever, who you see coming up right now who are inspiring you. When you look towards these challenges and opportunities that we face, are there, having once been students yourselves, now being educators, are there people that you see that are inspiring you for what they might achieve?
I'm looking
at
you.
I, for example, I get inspired every day by the kind of teams that I work with. For example, I have these groups of companies in my country portfolio that no matter the challenges, you'll still find them moving forward. And you keep asking yourself, like, why are they into business even when economic challenges, inflation and funding cuts, and it is so difficult to get donors currently funding private sector. But they are just they're just doing business. The inflation might go so high, there's shocks and challenges in the export markets, and they cannot supply anymore. Then you find them bouncing back to the local markets. Like recently, we had a challenge with our export of fresh produce from Kenya to the European markets. I had 5 companies that were affected. One of them is also a very young lawyer who just graduated from the university and got into the market. So her business was just like, I cannot supply anymore. But then they just bounce back into the local market, and they make the local market so active with their products. Right now, you go to the major retail supermarkets, and you find their products branded there. They've moved out of the export market and they're now selling to the local markets, and probably not getting better, but they are into business and making some profit margins. So I think we have continuously get inspired by those young people, young males and females, who constantly have got the resilience to continue remaining in business despite the shocks.
I think that's Peter's just given my answer. I'm mostly inspired by the kinds of stories that Peter shares and that I hear through the Self-Help Africa network as well. I think, of course, at a place like MIT, I'm surrounded by young people with, great ambition and huge ideas and all sorts of access to resources and other things. And they do incredible and inspiring things, whether it's on the science and technology front, or many of them in the Sloan School going out and trying to set up not just businesses, but other kinds of organizations that mean to have the sort of impact in the world that, frankly, Self-Help Africa has been able to have for such a long time. But the people that I get to encounter in that setting also have many advantages and opportunities and privileges as well. And as inspiring as it is, it's much more inspiring still to hear the examples that Peter talks about. So without even being able to sort of name names of those, I really appreciate the chance that this organization has given me to get to learn about those. And frankly, I can bring these stories and this inspiration and this purpose back into the programs that we run at MIT for those older generations of people that, as Neil has been describing, are still important, even though we have to be cautious about what advice we take from them and ourselves.
The little bit I can add to this, I think, is not everyone is inspired by the same elements or the same forces or the same exposure, and I'm self-aware of that. So in my total output, if I call it that, I give public talks, but you have to pay to get a ticket to get into a public talk. I write books. You have to buy the book to get that, okay? But I have a podcast. That's free. Okay, just get that online. And there's no less learning going on there than in these other venues. So if you don't have much money, you don't want a clever person who doesn't have much money to have no access to a path forward. And so of all the things I do, I make sure that there's something there for everyone, no matter your resources or no matter your entry point. I have a book called Astrophysics for People in a Hurry. Okay, so that's just all right. But if that's too short and too thin for you, I co-authored, I think it is a very very readable textbook on astrophysics. It's called Welcome to the Universe. I can say it in my planetarium voice. Welcome to the universe. So that's a book that's way more advanced, but that's another entry point for you. So I think one needs to be sensitive that there's the neurodiversity of us all, and not everyone has the same formula, the same key to open their lock of curiosity. And I try to stay sensitive and aware of that, and always putting forth something that will work for you.
Good. Thank you. That's I think it captures that sort of sense of community also that I think is so necessary for inspiring innovation and fostering it and growing it. It's a very delicate thing in a way, and I think that I think that flexibility and tailoring of that is
another
so
thing we've been doing. My podcasts are 45 minutes long. Maybe you don't have that attention span. Well, we've got people taking snippets of the podcast and posting those as 3-minute bits on social media. So again, that could be a doorway for you. You were never going to sit down for 45 minutes on a topic you didn't know anything about. We snip it out that little bit. Wow, that's interesting. Then you click on the bigger link. So just as an educator, not everyone learns the same way. Not everyone is inspired by the same forces. And if you don't have that awareness, you're not really an educator. You're a lecturer. A lecture, you face the chalkboard or whatever they're made of today, and you expect everyone to meet you at the chalkboard. But I think a true educator is facing the audience and is thinking about what are their receptors for learning. It's not going to be the same for everyone. So you give a mixture of what would work. so that everyone can benefit from what it is you're doing. And it's not just the singularly ambitious. You want to make other people who didn't even know they could be ambitious about it. Fan a flame that maybe is just embers, turn those into a flame, a raging firestorm within them, so that they become the future leaders, the future innovators, and the future entrepreneurs.
And you're not just describing education, but also learning.
Connor, I wanted to mention recently, this year, the county governor of Baringo. So Kenya has got 47 counties. Each county is led by a county governor who has also their own government for that county. So the county governor of Baringo got out of his own way to sell Self-Help Africa to the different embassies in Kenya. Selling Self-Help Africa, talking about our success, achievement in those counties and what we do, without us supporting him, just on his own way. And he would go to the EU to try to convince EU to give Self-Help Africa support, to be able, any support directed to the county of Baringo. You can imagine how that speaks a lot to us who are the implementers in terms of our impact in that county, because it simply means that the government looks at us like another valuable partner who is more practical in terms of delivering on the challenges Baringo County is facing. So that usually when we sit down in meetings, we keep feeling like, what next for Baringo? What do we give them? What is the level of support? So that is the kind of inspiration that we get from the communities that we work with, that they can appreciate that their life is changing and they would want more for you to be able to deliver for them.
You also touched on something there, which I think neither you or Connor will say, so I'll say it.
Yes.
Which is that Self-Help Africa is a very unusual organization in terms of the approach that you have and the value that you can create in the communities that you work with. And so the kind of recognition that you just described from a leader in that community who sees that and is picking on this organization to not only partner with, but to really help support and lift up. So, others could, speaking of learning, exactly. But speaking of the learning and the sharing and the competition and so forth, a lot of other organizations could learn a lot from this one about how to be effective.
Mm-hmm. I've just seen a vote shortly before this meeting. So I've seen the NGO board has sent out a vote. People are voting, and they have placed 4 organizations in the whole country in Kenya, and they want people to vote who is the best in terms of agricultural implementation. I'm looking at seeing how the results will come out because Self-Help Africa has been looked at in terms of delivery on agricultural challenges. We have been ranked very high in the country. But so we'll see how that plays around. And if the result is positive, like we are on top there, we will be happy, but we will continue to do more to keep our name on top. If it comes below the top, which we're not expecting, it's another positive thing. It means we need to increase doing best in terms of...
So you have 2 physicists on the panel. So originally I'm a physicist as well. So let me tell you, there's a measurement problem, right? So, what those people are measuring may or may not be the most important thing. We started this conversation talking about the sustainability of the work that you do. There's the direct impact, which I have seen, from in these 10 years. There's enormous direct impact that you have, but the method of having that impact is also having that sustainability, and I think that is incredibly differentiating for this organization. I think this organization is totally willing to share the benefit of that wisdom and all of that experience, and so I hope others will learn from what you all do and how to have not only that immediate impact which makes the headlines, but you're also doing the hard work, which is not always glamorous, to really put in place the systems that mean that one day you won't need to exist, perhaps, or at least not in those countries.
I was just going to say, I mean, I think
that's the ultimate measure of success.
Yes,
where you no longer need to exist.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just gonna say to be forgotten by your students is the ultimate success of the educator, right? So, so I think we're appreciative of all the kind words and the potential accolades, but ultimately that goal is to not be needed anymore, and I think that is something that I'm inspired by when I see it happening across the many different places where we work. So. Neil, Peter, I want to thank you for sitting down with us today. It's been great to speak with all of you, and we will look forward to keeping this conversation going. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.